On May 1st, 2023, a small plane disappeared over the Colombian Amazon. Search teams were deployed immediately. After 17 days of searching, they found the wreckage. 3 adults were dead inside, but the 4 children who had been on board were gone. What investigators found instead stopped them cold. A baby bottle, a tiny pair of abandoned shoes, and footprints, small ones, leading away from the crash site and disappearing into the deepest, most dangerous jungle on Earth. Someone had walked out of that wreckage and into the Amazon. The youngest was 11 months old. This is the ceased files. File 008 is now open. May 1st, 2023. A small Cessna C-206 lifts off from a remote airstrip in Colombia's Amazon region. On board, 7 people, a pilot, 2 adult men, and a young indigenous mother named Magdalena Mukutuai, traveling with her 4 children. Leslie, 13, Solani, 9, Tien Noriel, 4, and Kristen, 11 months old, still learning to walk. They were flying to their father's hometown, a routine journey over one of the most remote landscapes on Earth, the Bavaria rainforest, a place so dense and so dangerous that even experienced pilots approached it with fear. Somewhere over that forest, the engine failed. The pilot declared an emergency, and then the plane went down, into the jungle, into the dark. Colombian authorities launched an immediate search operation. Hundreds of square miles of dense, trackless rainforest. A place where the tree cover is so thick, sunlight barely reaches the ground. For days, nothing. Then on May 18th, searchers found the wreckage. The pilot and both adult passengers were dead inside, but the 4 children were not there. What the rescuers found at the crash site told a story nobody expected. A baby bottle lying in the undergrowth, a tiny pair of shoes, abandoned, as if a child had simply stepped out of them and kept walking. And in the soft mud, footprints, small ones, multiple sizes, leading away from the wreckage and into the jungle. The children had survived the crash, and they had walked away from it, deliberately, into one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The question was no longer whether they were alive. The question was, how long could they stay that way? What awaited those 4 children in the Colombian Amazon was not simply wilderness. It was a living, breathing system of danger operating at every level. The jungle floor, alive with venomous snakes. The canopy, home to jaguars, silent, patient, perfectly adapted to hunting in the dark. The air, thick with disease-carrying insects. And the rain, 16 hours a day, every day, pouring through the canopy, flooding the ground, dropping the night temperature to levels that kill. Into this, 4 children walked, one of them barely old enough to speak, one of them still in arms. The search operation, codenamed Operation Hope, deployed over 150 soldiers, search dogs, Black Hawk helicopters, and thermal imaging equipment. Indigenous trackers whose knowledge of the jungle far exceeded anything the military possessed joined the operation. 2 groups not always aligned, setting aside their differences because the stakes were too high for anything else. Helicopters dropped food boxes from the air. Planes fired flares over the canopy at night, and loudspeakers mounted on aircraft broadcast a voice message recorded by the children's own grandmother, her voice floating down through the canopy, telling her grandchildren to stay in one place, to wait, to hold on. Did they hear it? Nobody knew. Days passed, then weeks. On May 30th, a soldier found a single small footprint in the mud, fresh, a child's footprint. They were still alive, still moving, still out there. But 40 days in the Amazon for a 13-year-old carrying a baby felt like a sentence no search operation could outrun. On June 9th, 2023, 40 days after the plane went down, soldiers pushing through the undergrowth heard something. Not an animal, not the rain, a sound that stopped every soldier in the search party. Children's voices. They pushed through and found them. All 4, together, thin, dehydrated, covered in insect bites, exhausted beyond description, but alive. All 4 of them, alive. A helicopter was called. Because the jungle floor was too dense to land, the aircraft hovered above the canopy while soldiers used lines to pull each child up, one by one, into the aircraft. Christine, 11 months old, was lifted up last, wrapped in a thermal blanket. A soldier held a bottle to her lips. The helicopter banked away over the canopy toward Bogota. When the news broke, Colombia erupted. People in the streets, tears, embraces. A country that had held its breath for 40 days finally exhaled. Now, here is what investigators pieced together about how 4 children survived 40 days in the Amazon. Leslie woke up in the wreckage, injured, a deep cut on her face, a wounded leg. She looked for her mother. Magdalena was alive, but critically injured. She survived the crash. For 4 days, she stayed alive, long enough to tell her children one final thing. Leave me. Look after yourselves. Go. And so 13-year-old Leslie, a child herself, became a mother overnight. She pulled baby Kristen from the wreckage. She gathered her siblings, and she walked them into the jungle. How did they survive it? Leslie and her siblings were not ordinary children lost in an ordinary forest. They were indigenous children of the Huitoto people, raised in the Amazon, taught from birth how to read the jungle, how to identify safe fruits, how to find water, how to build shelter, how to move without disturbing what lived around them. They ate wild fruits. They found cassava flour that had been on the plain and rationed it carefully. They kept moving, always moving, for 40 days, never stopping. A 13-year-old girl, injured, alone, carrying a baby through one of the most lethal environments on Earth for 40 days without a single adult to help her. General Sanchez, who led Operation Hope, was asked how they survived. He said 3 things: the will to live, indigenous immunity to the jungle's hazards, and most simply, they knew the jungle. And the jungle, for once, let them through. Leslie, Solange, Tien Noriel, Christine, 4 children, 40 days. One of the most hostile places on Earth. Their mother told them to go, and they went. They are alive today. This file, unlike most that the ceased files opens, does not end with questions unanswered or justice unserved. It ends with 4 children who refused, against every odd the jungle could stack against them, to stop. This is the ceased files. Some files end in darkness. This one ends in light. The investigation ceased. The truth didn't.